A thought that can conceive but hardly knows arises slowly in her and creates the idea, the speech that labels more than it lights. A trembling gladness that is less than bliss invades from all this beauty that must die. Alarmed, dragging at her feet, and conscious of the high things not yet won, ever she nurses in her sleep an inward urge that takes from her rest and peace. We see then that she nurses, she guides, looks after, fosters in her sleepless breast, because she is conscious of the high things not yet won, and she is alarmed also by the sorrow dragging at her feet. And all of this she nurses in her sleepless breast. And what is it but an inward urge? It's an inward urge that takes from her rest and peace. Now, Sri Aurobindo continues, ignorant and weary and invincible. She seeks through the soul's war and quivering pain the pure perfection her marred nature needs, a breath of Godhead on her stone and mire. Oh, very powerful, huh? She is ignorant, she is weary, and yet she is invincible. And she seeks through the soul's war and quivering pain. This quivering pain means a pain that shakes with a slight, rapid, tremulous movement, especially with emotion. But here it's the soul's war and quivering pain. And what is she seeking for? She's seeking for the pure perfection that her marred nature needs. And marred here is a poetical, in the poetical sense, it's impaired. It's an impaired nature. It's a damaged nature, almost a spoiled nature. And she seeks that pure perfection that this marred nature needs. And what is that pure perfection but a breath of Godhead on her stone and mire? Mire is always mud. I believe Sri Aurobindo tells us that we cannot understand the lotus from its flowering without understanding the mire in which it grows. We continue. A faith she craves that can survive defeat, the sweetness of a love that knows not death, the radiance of a truth forever sure. So this is what she wants. This is what she wants. A faith that is able to survive defeat. She craves it. You know, when we have a craving for something, we really want it. It may even be an ice cream cone, but it's a craving. It's a desire. But here that desire is something so far elevated that this crave that she has, this faith that can survive defeat, and this sweetness of a love that knows not death. In speaking of the body the other day, I was reading Sri Aurobindo's words, and he says that because we are not plastic enough, the body deteriorates because it cannot grow at the speed of the spirit, and therefore death is necessary. But he says death is not really necessary if we could become more plastic, more open to the supreme beauty, supreme delight, supreme force. He says bodies do not break down, decompose, and die in other planes, but they do on Earth. Because Earth, being evolutionary, we have to keep up with the force that is here. That force has been with us all along in various degrees. It has been at the time of the Vedas. It has humanized Europe with the coming of Christ. It has been here in Krishna. And finally, the dual avatars, Sri Aurobindo and Mother, have brought down this supramental world that will survive defeat and will change everything in its own time. And it is based on a love that has conquered death and will bring us into the supramental world and afterwards even into Satchit Ananda. The sweetness of a love that knows not death, the radiance of a truth forever sure, that is certainly in the supramental. And this radiance is a brightness that sends out rays of light. So now he says, a light grows in her. She assumes a voice. Her state she learns to read, and the act she has done. But the one needed truth eludes her grasp, herself, and all of which she is the sign. Oh, this assume, to take on as one's own, to adopt. She takes this aspect, this attribute on herself. A light grows in her, no doubt, and it has been growing despite all the negativity in the world. She assumes a voice. She learns to read her state. She learns to read the act she has done, but the one needed truth eludes her grasp. To elude is to avoid or escape, to evade. It eludes her grasp. And what is that one needed truth? It's herself, and all of which she is the sign. So now we have more on her, and it is very, very, very poignant in a way, because an inarticulate whisper drives her steps, of which she feels the force, but not the sense. A few rare intimations come as guides. Immense divining flashes cleave her brain. And sometimes, in her hours of dream and muse. The truth that she has missed looks out on her as if far off, and yet within her soul. This inarticulate whisper, it is something that is not uttered or emitted with expressive modulations. It's not articulate at all. It's an inarticulate whisper. So it's very difficult for her to understand the sense of it. She feels the force of it because the force is very powerful, but she doesn't understand the sense of it. And yet we have now a semicolon. A few intimations come as guides. What are those intimations? Well, they're indications, they're subtle hints or suggestions. A few rare intimations come as guides. And then Sri Aurobindo tells us that immense divining flashes cleave her brain. How powerful, huh? A divining flash is a heavenly or celestial flash, a magnificent flash, an intuitive flash, you might say, that cleaves her brain. To cleave means, well, there are a couple of definitions of cleave, and it's not of it's more penetrate than splitting open. It's more clinging, but actually penetrating her brain. So there are a few intimations coming as guides. There are these immense divining flashes cleaving her brain. And divining flashes, of course, something magnificent, something heavenly or celestial. I mentioned that. And then we have, and sometimes only, in her hours of dream and muse, the truth that she has missed looks out on her, as if far off and yet within her soul. Sri Aurobindo, as I've often said, likes to use as if. It gives us a different feeling. It seemed as if the whole world was going to ruin. It seemed as if this tsunami would inundate a city. So here is as if far off, but it's not far off. It's still within her soul, only it seems far off. So we'll continue a little more on this powerful passage. A change comes near that flees from her surmise and, ever postponed, compels attempt and hope, yet seems too great for mortal hope to dare. Ah, so very, very interesting. A change comes near. So we also had in the previous line, as if far off, and yet within her soul. A change comes near that flees from her surmise. Surmise is an idea or a thought of something as possible or likely. It can even be a guess, but here it's more, not even a suspicion, but an idea or a thought of something as being likely. A change comes near that flees from her surmise and, ever postponed, compels attempt and hope, yet seems too great for mortal hope to dare. So this change that flees from her and is ever postponed still compels attempt and hope. We are in the midst of a COVID virus that is decimating India. And yet we hope that it will go, that the divine will clear it out one day. Even to dare about that, to believe fully that it will happen. And then we see this beautiful new section. A vision meets her of supernal powers that draw her as if mighty kinsmen lost, approaching with estranged, great luminous gaze. Oh. Sri Aurobindo capitalizes powers, and as you know, I always look for his definitions when he capitalizes a word. So now we have the word powers. Here they are supernal powers, but there are other powers also. He writes in his letters on yoga, these are the forces and beings that are interested in maintaining the falsehoods they have created in the world of the ignorance, and in putting them forward as the truth which men must follow. In India, they are termed asuras, rakshasas, pisachas, being respectively of the mentalized vital, middle vital, and lower vital planes, who are in opposition to the gods, the powers of light. These too are powers, for they too have their cosmic field in which they exercise their function and authority, and some of them were once divine powers, and he capitalizes powers all through this quote. The former gods, as they are called somewhere in the Mahabharata, who have fallen towards the darkness by revolt against the divine will behind the cosmos. But here it is not those powers. Here it is a vision that meets her of supernal powers, heavenly powers. And those heavenly powers draw her as if mighty kinsmen lost, approaching with estranged, great luminous gaze. So they approach her as family, relatives, kinsmen that have been lost. And they are approaching with this great luminous gaze, but it's estranged. Estranged means withdrawn, withheld, kept at a distance. So there she has this vision of these supernal powers that actually draw her, just like family that she has known and lost, approaching with this withdrawn, almost alien, great luminous gaze. And she feels that. And what does she do? Then is she moved to all that she is not, and stretches arms to what was never hers. I don't know if we can go too much more. Well, we can, yes, we can go. We'll have many things next week to to define, because we have fate that has to be defined, and time that has to be defined, and the mind that has to be defined, and will. So we will go through that next week, but I will read the lines first because they're so powerful. Then is she moved to all that she is not, and stretches arms to what was never hers, outstretching arms to the unconscious void. Passionate, she prays to invisible forms of gods, soliciting from dumb fate and toiling time what most she needs, what most exceeds her scope, a mind unvisited by illusion's gleams, a will expressive of soul's deity, a strength not forced to stumble by its speed, a joy that drags not sorrow as its shade. Oh, there is so much here, and the definitions will help us greatly next week. But let's just go over a little bit. She is outstretching her arms to the unconscious void. Why is she doing that? Well, she's praying passionately to these invisible forms of gods. And she's soliciting from dumb fate and toiling time. Well, we have soliciting here, and this is making a request as for something that she desires. Now, the word dumb, I may have told you, but I will never stop telling you, it is never in the colloquial sense of stupid. Sri Aurobindo always uses it as silent. So fate here is silent, and we have much to speak of in fate and toiling time. So she is making a request for this, what she desires. And she's praying to invisible forms of gods, soliciting from dumb fate and toiling time. And what are these things which she is soliciting? First, she wants a mind unvisited by illusion's gleams. Then she wants a will expressive of soul's deity. And then a strength not forced to stumble by its speed. And lastly, a joy that drags not sorrow as its shade. Ah, that joy that we all aspire for, that doesn't tow sorrow, he says, as its shade. Oh, how beautiful. Let me see now. Archana, would you read everything from the beginning?
Yeah, sure. Can you move to that line on the screen?
Pardon? Yeah, we're going to begin with well, we could begin with the Earth Goddess because she is toiling across the sands of time. So if you could begin with a being is in her. A word speaks to her heart. She cannot hear. There it is.
Yeah. A being is in her whom she hopes to know. A word speaks to a heart she cannot hear. A fate compels whose form she cannot see. In her unconscious orbit through the void, out of her mindless depths she strives to rise. A perilous life her gain, a struggling joy, a thought that can conceive but hardly knows, arises slowly in her heart, arises slowly in her and creates the idea, the speech that labels more than it lights. A trembling gladness that is less than bliss invades from all this beauty that must die. Alarmed by the sorrow dragging at her feet, and conscious of the high things not yet won, ever she nurses in her sleepless breast an inward urge that takes from her rest and peace. Ignorant and weary and invincible, she seeks through the soul's war and quivering pain the pure perfection her marred nature needs, a breath of Godhead on her stone and mire, a fate she craves that can survive defeat, the sweetness of a love that knows not death, the radiance of a truth forever sure. A light grows in her, she assumes a voice. Her state she learns to read and the act she has done. But the one needed truth eludes her grasp. Herself and all of which she is the sign, an inarticulate whisper. I lost the line. An inarticulate whisper drives her steps, of which she feels the force but not the sense. A few rare intimations come as guides, immense divining flashes cleave her brain, and sometimes in her hours of dream and muse, the truth that she has missed looks out on her, as if far off and yet within her soul. A change comes near that flees from her surmise, and ever postponed compels attempt and hope, yet seems too great for mortal hope to dare. Her vision meets her of supernal powers that draw her as if mighty kinsmen lost, approaching with estranged, great, luminous gaze. Then is she moved to all that she is not, and stretches arms to what was never hers. Outstretching arms to the unconscious void, passionate she prays to invisible forms of gods, soliciting from dumb fate and toiling time what most she needs, what most exceeds her scope, a mind unvisited by illusions gleams, a will expressive of soul's deity, a strength not forced to stumble by its speed, a joy that drags not sorrow as its shade.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for attending today to this very, very important section. This earth goddess, you see, for us, this Divine Mother is working on each of us and for that we may all reach the supramental in the least amount of time. So we'll meet again next week. And I thank all of you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you, Naraji.
Thank you.
Naraji, you referred to
Bye.
you referred to something you read that you sent to Vladimir.
Yes.
Would you be able to share that with us, please?
To share that with you. Well,
Yes.
it's
Or where it's from?
basically it's Sri Aurobindo's answers to disciples, and it's in his letters on yoga, tome
Okay.
1. Tome 1. And it's so extraordinary. I've had to break it up into parts because it's almost too much to attempt to read at one time. So I've completed 2 parts thus far, and I will go on, try hopefully every day reading another part. But I'll just take a few minutes if you all have the time and read a little bit of it for you. I have to get it here now. Let's see. Okay. I'm also doing the ideal of human unity that will become through the wonderful work of Vladimir, an ebook so that people can listen to it. I don't know why this is not opening, but
audiobook. We will create audiobook.
pardon?
Audiobook.
Oh, sorry, audiobook. Yes, yes, audiobook. That's very important. So, yeah, I have sent you. I'll read just a few lines. There have been times when the seeking for spiritual attainment was, at least in certain civilizations, more intense and widespread than now, or rather than it has been in the world in general during the past few centuries. Look how he sees it all. He's seen something 70 years after he left his body. For now, the curve seems to be the beginning of a new turn of seeking, which takes its start from what was achieved in the past and projects itself towards a greater future. But always, even in the age of the Vedas or in Egypt, the spiritual achievement or the occult knowledge was confined to a few. It was not spread in the whole mass of humanity. The mass of humanity evolves slowly, containing in itself all stages of the evolution, from the material and the vital man to the mental man. A small minority has pushed beyond the barriers, opening the doors to occult and spiritual knowledge and preparing the ascent of the evolution beyond mental man into spiritual and supramental being. So beautiful. One could go on, and I will. He speaks of the cycles of evolution tending always upward, but they are cycles and do not ascend in a straight line. The process, therefore, gives the impression of a series of ascents and descents, but what is essential in the gains of the evolution is kept, or even if eclipsed for a time, re-emerges in new forms suitable to the new ages. And we've gone a little bit over our time, so when Vladimir downloads it, then you can hear the whole thing. Namaste. Thank you for
Thank
attending.
you. Namaste.
Thank you, Naraji.